Modern Horizons 3 black cards.
Next on Eternal Dirtles.
Hey, I just want to give a quick shout out to all of our Patreon supporters out there. Thank you to the Dirtle Maniacs. If you want to be a Dirtle Maniac, go to patreon.com/eternaldurtles and help support the channel. It keeps things going. It keeps things updated. Thanks so much for watching. On with the show.
Hello and welcome to Eternal Dirtles. I'm your host, Zach Clark, and with me as always, Phil Blackman. Phil, how's it going, man?
Zach, I swear, even if they put Magus of the Sensei's top in black, I would play it.
Yep.
I would use it.
I bet they would. I bet you would.
It doesn't matter what color you put it in. I'll play it. I'm here for it.
Right. You'd have to get it altered, obviously. To that end, Phil, someone asked us, and I'll pop the question up here, but someone asked us about your alters. Let me get the exact wording of that question so that I can answer it properly here. Which was, what's Phil's go-to place for alterations? So you're known as the alter guy, and before we get the black cards rolling here, you sent me kind of a nice little wall of text on this, and I think I just like you to answer it for anybody who's wondering.
Yeah, for sure. So I initially got into alters back in the day, long time ago. I want to say 2012. It was after Avacyn Restored came out, because my big first commission for alters was for altering my Miracles deck. So that must have been early on. So it has to have been 2011 or 2012 was when I first got into it. And that was when, I was still fresh out of college. And so but I wanted to get my whole list altered. So I found at the time, it was a Canadian artist that was willing to do alters for cards. So I didn't have money at the time, but I had built up a collection of just like having played for however many years. So I didn't have enough money to pay for a large commission, but I did have like a bunch of cards where I was like, you know what, I really enjoy Miracles. I don't think I need to like have all of these other legacy cards that like I'm never going to play. Like, at the time I had like Tarmogoyfs when they were a bunch of money, and Wastelands that I wasn't going to use, and I had like excess cards that from other colors that I just like wasn't interested in. I was like, and at the time it was also when the community at large was in the headspace of like, you just play one deck, you get really good at it. The Reed Duke school of just get good at one deck and commit yourself. And so I enjoyed the deck. I had tried some other stuff. Like I'd played Storm for a while. I played Merfolk for a while. So I was like, neither of those decks really, or style of play really speaks to me. And then I fell in love with Miracles. And I was like, okay, I'm going to move into this and commit to this thing. And it's going to be great. And so I traded a bunch of my collection for that first stint of like for a big commission. That's talking like my tops, my counterbalances, my Snapcaster Mages at the time, my Jace the Mind Sculptors at the time, most of my duels at the time. That were in Miracles. And then since then, I've only really gotten alters for, excessive alters for what is reasonably playable in Miracles. So I actually, even though people know me as the alter guy, I actually get alters done relatively infrequently, because my only stance now when I get something altered is it relatively a staple in Miracles? Because that's the archetype that I enjoy playing the most. And so if I'm going to like actually bling anything out, but also at the time when I first got into altered cards, it was at a time where nowadays foils are cheaper than regular cards sometimes, because there's so many different variations and so many foils, but not the case back in the day. Back in the day, foils were double at least of any type of card. Like a foil Jace the Mind Sculptor ran you like $800, $1,000. Like it was like if you wanted to foil fetch lands. I mean, I get that the Onslaught fetches now are like really pricey still, like exceptionally pricey, but like they were pricey back in the day too. So it was actually cheaper to alter than it was to foil back then, because every alter, regardless of what the card was, as long as it wasn't too insanely detailed, your common would be the same price as your mythic, depending on the artist. So long story short, though. I went to an artist for a while back in the 20-teens that was a good alterist that I had a good relationship with, that did a lot of my alters at the time. It's where I discovered that I really liked like the full art. Like most people now, if you see me with new alters, you'll see that it's like full art that covers the text box. I really enjoy that like full window pane style of alter. But that alterist doesn't do any more alters. Since that alterist stopped doing alters, I just started branching into working with a bunch of different artists over the years. So like I've worked with I feel like it's been like a dozen artists in the last handful of years. And usually what I do is I'll just like either find their stuff on social, or I'll go to the Facebook Alterist group where people post their stuff. And then I'll try and line up whatever card I want altered, like the actual art on the card, because I'm only getting full extensions. So whatever that art translates to, if it seems like an artist, it would work well with their style. So it's a little bit more in depth. It's not just like I go to one artist anymore that like, handles everything that I used to back when I was younger. Nowadays, I like sort of try and line up like, okay, this artist seems like they would be really good with the pattern or the style of this artwork that I'm trying to extend. And so I go.
How do you find those artists though, Phil?
Oh, that's what I mean. So usually I'll go through social media. So whether it's like Instagram or whatever, where people have like their, Instagram functions as their portfolio a lot of the time.
Got it.
Or I'll look on Facebook altar groups, which there's, a half dozen of. And people also post their work in there, and they'll let you know if they have commissions open or not. And then I'll also, if there are any artists that I haven't worked with that I want to, I just sort of like have my own personal like little list where I like keep track of like, their contact info, and like, I'll routinely, whenever I need a new altar, I'll like go and see if they're taking commissions at the time. If there's somebody that I still want to work with, and I'll like, if they're taking commissions, great. I'll send them. I'll see what they think, because I have had times where I've gone to altarists before. So like a story, I won't share the altarists because I want to be respectful of them. But when I initially wanted Triumph of St. Catherine altered, I knew immediately when it came out, I was like, well, I'm getting a set of this altered immediately. So before it was even released, I like reached out to a couple of different artists to see what their availability was and to see if they wanted to do the commission, because it's not an easy commission to do. Yeah. So I reached out to one artist who accepted. And then a week after they were going to start working on the commission, they actually reached back out and were like, hey, man, so I thought that like this would work out. I had a couple of ideas what I wanted to do, but then when I sketched him out, he was like, I don't actually think this is going to look all that great. So like I'm going to respectfully decline to do this commission, because I don't think that there's anything that I'll be able to do that I will like for my own portfolio, because you got to remember like any work that they do is a reflection of their work. But then also they were like, but I can't give anything that you want. And I'm pretty easy when it comes to when I commission somebody. I'm like, this is the style I want full art, whatever. But then like how you do it, what you do it, like, freedom to the artist, like how you want to figure that, like what would it excite you to paint? But otherwise I'm just like, I want a full art thing that covers the text box that like leaves this window pane, but like otherwise it's all you. Sometimes I'll extend over the border depending on what the art is. But for anybody who tries to alter, things to keep in mind. Nowadays it may be looser because there's a whole bunch of different variations and nobody can read cards at all anyway. Yeah. But still technically in the rules, the name can't be obstructed, the mana cost can't be obstructed, and the power, toughness, and or loyalty can't be obstructed. So they can paint around all that, but any other text that is covered, even if it's the, where it says creature, instant, whatever, like that bar, or the text box, all of that can be covered because that falls under the foreign language rules, where if you're playing with Japanese cards and I can't read Japanese, it might as well be altered, right? I still can't read it. I'm essentially going off of what the artwork is. So before there was rules where like you couldn't have different artwork, like you couldn't put a whole new artwork that's like unrecognizable is the term that they use. So if you had art that's unrecognizable, it technically doesn't count, or it could technically be disqualified by the head judge. There's secret layers have upended that so entirely, and they have. So the thing is that they haven't updated the rules for altars to reflect the new world that we're in of all of these crazy variants. But if you use altars, always go to the head judge. If a judge ever at this point with all of the secret layers and stuff ever like declines you being allowed to use altars of any kind, as long as they can feel the cards don't have any additional thickness or texture, in which case they'd be marked cards. So if there's nothing like that makes them marked cards, they're just like, oh, I can't recognize what this card is. Literally show them like, I don't know, literally any secret layer card. literally any secret layer with all the different variations. Like if any head judge is like, you're not allowed to play with these altars, in my mind, they're just being an asshole because of like, we're mostly a casual format.
Appeal to their sense of decency and be like, hey man, like I can't buy these again immediately.
I have never ran into I have ran into that scenario exactly and only once, and it was long before all the new variations or world of like 60 different versions.
And you top 8'd that event famously with a basic forest.
No, I top 32'd that event, but yeah. But no, so you just reminded me. So that was the second one. So it's happened 2 times, both of which were a long time ago. There was one time where I had an Umezawa's Jite that was altered, where Raphael from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was just holding the Jite. So you could still see the Jite. It was in the artwork and everything, but there was now this new character, and they were like, you can't play with that. I can't tell what that is. And I'm like, it's a Ninja Turtle holding the card. And they were like, you're not allowed to play with it. So I was like, rather at the time though, Jite was $50. And I was like, well, I'm not shelling out $50 for this card that's in my sideboard. I was playing Esper Mentor in that event. So I was like, I made a joke. I was like, okay, I'm going to play with a 14 card sideboard because I just like got a forest. But then I top 32 the event, and then it became the running bit that it was like there was no reason to use a basic forest. But the thing is that rather than think that I was just trolling, everybody assumed that it was there in earnest and tried to figure out what it could possibly have been for, which was very funny. The other time was when I had a set of Force of Wills that were altered with members of Marvel superheroes in place of like the character and the art. Yeah, like it was the X-Men in place of the artwork. And even though that they were, it was like, you know, it's Force of Will. You know, it's not like anything else is obstructed. It was only the art box, not anything else. But one judge was like, you can't tell what it is. You can't play with them. So for that event, fortunately, I was able to borrow a set of Force of Wills from a friend of mine who was not playing them that weekend. Yeah. But if that happened now, I would look the judge dead in the eye and be like, really?
Yeah.
Like, really? And then I'd go like, be like, can we look at any secret lair in any of these cases right now that I could play with legally? Yeah. So I don't fret that. But like, yeah, if anybody's interested in altering cards, like, you know, every altarist has a different rate, different schedules. You know, what commissions they're willing to accept will be different. So it's a little bit of effort, but like, you know, if you want to do it, it's fun. I obviously like it. It gives me a sense, like, you know, I do it instead of getting my entire body tattooed. So I tattoo my cards instead.
I do the tattoos.
Yeah, you do the tattoos on the body. I do the tattoos on my collection. So, yeah. But yeah, that's where it is. I don't have any individual go-to artist. I go to a bunch of different artists these days, and I always am excited to work with new artists as well. So like, just like when also it is like when you let it be known that you are looking for altars, altarists sometimes will also reach out to you and be like, hey, I have availability if you're looking for something, if they know you. That's happened a couple of times. Like, I got some of my Life of the Loams and my Wastelands altered because there was an altarist who was like, hey, next time you're looking to get anything commissioned, like, let me know. I'd love to do some work. Because they had just seen my stuff on my deck on 90s MTG. So they were like, next time you need an artist, let me know. So like, I've worked with artists that way before. So, you know, you just got to be open to stuff. And then, you know, whatever you want to, like, every artist has a different style. So like, look for the style that lines up with the card that you're looking to get altered.
Yeah. Eternal Durdles is sponsored by Tales of Adventure. You can go to toamagic.com, use the code DURTLES for 5% off your order, and you're going to get that whole order in one package. No more waiting for 5 or 6 or 12 packages to show up at your door so that you can finish your deck. toamagic.com, code DURTLES for 5% off, and you'll be directly supporting the show. All right, well, we're 10 minutes in. Let's talk about some black cards from Modern Horizons 3. So I just added one. Accursed Marauder is a 2/1 for 1 and a black. It's a zombie warrior. It says when Accursed Marauder enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a non-token creature. Oh, this is the cheapest that this effect has ever been on a creature, as far as I can tell. So I just wanted to mention that, throw that in there. I don't think this is like format warping or even a card that you're going to see come into play a lot. But you know, I've had Fleshbag Marauder or like Plague Crafter or whatever that is cast against me, so this is a card.
Yeah. They just decreased it down by a mana, and if it sees play, like, okay, it's a deck that's looking to have creatures that like needs a removal spell. I don't know what deck that would be in Legacy, and also it's going to be really hard for them to creep another edict harder than Sheoldred's Edict that is effectively just Doomblade, or better than Doomblade. It's just remove target whatever you want. So like being able to remove any creature and or any planeswalker is functionally what Sheoldred's Edict actually reads as in this format. So I think it'll be really hard for them to do anything more aggressive than target player sacrifices a creature or planeswalker of your choice. You know? Yeah.
All right. So on to the first, I would say the first real card. Chthonian Nightmare is a 2-mana enchantment that is 1 and a black for an enchantment that reads, when it enters the battlefield, you get 3 energy, pay X energy, sacrifice a creature, return Chthonian Nightmare to its owner's hand, return target creature with mana value X from your graveyard to the battlefield, activate only as a sorcery. So this is a callback to Recurring Nightmare. What do you think, Phil?
So all of the reanimation effects we have in Legacy are just the best versions that we're ever going to get because they're the cheapest. Then, you know, like it's 1 mana and 2 mana and that's it. So like that'll never be changed. I imagine that this is, if this goes into anything, it'll be used as it's a 2-mana sack outlet that can be recursive. Yeah. So I think it's the sack a creature type thing for value that we're looking to get with this thing. Yeah. The issue though is that because it's based on the energy that you get, but you get 3 energy every time. I'm reading this actually as pay X energy, whatever that may look like, but return target creature with CMC 3 or less.
Yeah.
and that's it. Like unless you like recur something lower, and then when you bounce this back, and then you build up some amount of energy and then go again. But I assume that if this ever sees play, it will be the only energy card in the deck, which means that I imagine that you will never play it with any creatures less than 3 mana, or I'm sorry, greater than 3 mana. But also, like, are there any creatures that you would want to do that with anyway in the format? Probably not. It's sort of the format's sort of compressed to be that low anyway.
I'm thinking this is probably like a fun of and like a Lauren maybe, like possibly is like, oh, I get back the thing I need, and then we're off to the races, you know, like that kind of thing. Like I could see that happening. But yeah, I agree. I like there are better ways to recur creatures, but recurring nightmare is banned in this format. So I mean, there is that to say, you know.
It is not banned in this format.
It is not. We can play recurring nightmare.
Hold on. Hold on. I'll put my co-hostship of this podcast on the line.
Oh no. If
a 3 mana conditional reanimation effect is banned when reanimate is legal.
We're about to find out, guys. Phil. All right, here we go. No, it is not. It is not.
It's on the reserve list.
Oh no, modern.
Sure.
Hold on, that was the modern one. Yeah, no. I don't know. I don't know where my mind's at about that. That's weird. That's weird that I thought that, because we do like a band episode every year. You'd think I would have talked about that for like a second and been like, yeah, that's a card that can come off. Okay, well, anyhow.
Chthonian Nightmare, though, one thing that to think about, though, is if sack outlets are interesting to you in any capacity, that it is a sack outlet that you can play before you have the creature. It can just be on the table, right? So that's like being able to play your sack outlet first that isn't a creature. So like, you know, I mean, most times I imagine people use the sack outlets that are the combo pieces, like the artifacts, what's the artifact where you sack a creature and then it's not Ashdod's out there, it's Altar of Dementia, or you know those types of combo pieces that are sack outlets. I mean, we've seen Phyrexian Altar with like the Grave Crawler shenanigans in tier 27. So like
I struggle to see where this could get played, but like maybe you could do like Priest of Gix into Priest of Gix and create infinite mana.
Yeah. If you want to do a super cute like A+B combo deck that needs a 3rd card payoff, because there's only infinite of those available to us, but that one at least has Dark Ritual and it's all black.
Yeah, or you just have infinite energy to do something with. Okay, well, anyhow, Chthonian Nightmare is a card that exists, and you might see it. It might see play somewhere. We don't know where. All right, Emperor of Bones is a 2/2 for 1 and a black. It is a creature, skeleton noble. At the beginning of combat on your turn, exile up to 1 target card from a graveyard, and it has adapt for 1 and a black. Adapt 2. Whenever 1 or more counters are put onto Emperor of Bones, put a creature card exiled with Emperor of Bones onto the battlefield under your control with a finality counter on it. It gains haste. Sacrifice it at the end of at the beginning of the next end step. Now, the way just because like it's been a minute, I believe finality counter. If you have to sacrifice it, it goes away forever, right? Like
it's
that
exiled,
just gets exiled.
But,
yeah. And then also adapt
is
you can't add more counters to this if it has counters on it. So you're going to get to do this one time.
Adapt is a single time effect if it has +1/+1 counters. So if at any point you remove the counters of it, somehow you would be able to adapt again. But once it has adapted, you can't continue to adapt.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is like a weird graveyard hate card. Almost like in the style of like where like Dothy Voidwalker exists, but you have to like I don't know. It just seems like a possible hate card that like some deck might want. And maybe you want to go on.
I was gonna say my whole like the only thing I'll say about this card is this card won't see play because Dothy Voidwalker exists.
Well, yes,
that's
it. I agree. But to that end, it's a design space for sure. And like I said, you do get that payoff the turn it comes into play. Assuming you're casting this before combat. So it's a card that has some text on it that might be interesting. All right. Let's go to Fate of Malice. Flare of Malice. Sorry. Flare of Malice is a 4 mana instant that says you may sacrifice a non-token black creature rather than pay the spell's mana cost. So it's one of the flare cards. Each opponent sacrifices a creature or planeswalker with the greatest power among creatures or, greatest mana value among creatures or planeswalkers they control. I don't think this will see play for any reason other than like Children's Edict exists, and I think you'd just rather be on that plan if this is the effect you're looking for.
Yeah, this one is tough to me because I get that it is free, but there are so many just variations of this kind of removal spell that is may or may not be good. I mean, the problem to me is that it sacrifices a creature or planeswalker, and I feel like you just really need exile. You know, like you need something to say exile on it. The best deck in the format that's been running rampant is all reanimation effects. So it's like your removal spell here isn't great, and then there aren't any reliable non-token black creatures that you would want to sacrifice unless you are doing this as like some kind of trade to a removal spell. But
just the Emperor.
If that were the case, it's like, yeah, like this one strikes me as just like I think you need again to get the value out of the sacrifice if this is the version of the card that you'd want to play, because we've seen a 4-drop with Convoke. So if you were playing creatures and, you know, like if you were playing Bowmaster, which is making 2 bodies, there's the one with Convoke that lets you connive for each creature that convoked that was printed earlier this year. That sees no play. There are just like other ways where if you have creatures in play to like get free or close to free with upside removal spells. So I just don't see this one actually making the cut because I can't think of what deck would want this outside of a deck that is looking for another free sack outlet. But like this is a conditional free sack outlet because you can't. Well, I guess it's each opponent. So I guess you could sacrifice. You could just cast this even if they don't have a target. Yeah.
I think yes. Yeah, I think you can. But because
so
it's no target. It's just each opponent.
Each opponent, right? Yeah. So given that, like, I mean, if anything, if you're looking to sacrifice a black creature, I could see this as powerful in that it reads 0 mana, sacrifice a black creature.
Yeah.
Okay. If you needed a free sack outlet for anything that like could generate some kind of absurd value, then you now have a 0 mana sacrifice outlet, at instant speed. So that's not nothing. But other than that, I don't think this is going to like, be fighting for slots over, the removal that's currently seeing play. Yep,
I agree. All right. This card, I do not think it'll see play, but I do want to talk about this interesting effect that it has. Mindless Conscription is 2 and a black for an enchantment. When Mindless Conscription enters the battlefield, and whenever you draw your 3rd card each turn, amass zombies 3. We all know amass because Orcish Bowmasters amasses orcs. The reason why I want to talk about this card just for a second, Phil, is obviously Brainstorm exists, so you can proc this off of Brainstorm, and like you could be like, I'll cast this in my like Pox deck or whatever, because like that's the only time I can think of a deck that would actually want an effect like this, where like you're just like, we're gonna make our opponent sack everything. But if you can find a way to draw cards, and there are ways to get to your 3rd card in mono black, this card is interesting because it's putting up sort of a threat, and then it's just building on that threat if you happen to do it again. So like doing this and just like having a 6/6 that's relatively expendable is interesting, and I just wonder if we're getting slightly closer to a point where a Pox deck might go from like tier 4 up to like tier 2/5.
Zach, I want to say that one of the reasons I love doing the show with you is how humble and admirable you are, looking at this card as anything other than something that goes directly in the trash.
Well,
Zach, it is a 3 mana do nothing, and then the thing that it
doesn't do nothing. It puts a 3/3 into play when you cast it.
It's a 3 mana do nothing.
It's a 3 mana 3/3,
and then the thing that it asks you to do to get the payoff of what it does is a thing that would otherwise or should otherwise already win you the game.
Yeah.
How many times can you draw 3 cards and not be doing anything more powerful than make a 3/3?
Next up is Necrodominance, a card that allows you to draw 3 cards. So I want to talk about that card. This is why I talked about Mindless Conscription, because Necrodominance exists. And I think, hey, we've been saying for a long time, Phil, free Necropotence, and this is pretty close. Necrodominance is 3 black mana for a legendary enchantment that says skip your draw step. At the beginning of your end step, you may pay any amount of life. If you do, draw that many cards. Your maximum hand size is 5. And then if a card or token would be put anywhere into your graveyard, exile it instead. So what do you think about this card, Phil?
I think I don't see this card doing anything interesting. And,
no?
And hear me out. By not doing anything interesting, I mean, if this sees play, it is just part of it. It is the thing that enables the combo deck to kill you with all of the other stuff that would otherwise normally already kill us, or it does nothing. Like the existence of this card,
it is 0 or 60. It's not. Yeah.
That's why I'm like, like all the talk about like, okay, if we could unban Necro, it's mostly just like, do we need the single and only deck that exists to play it and actually leverage it to its potential necessary? You know?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we could ask Brian Cook, right?
Yeah. And it's like, the thing is like, whether or not exactly and only Bryant and his contingent of Storm Bros are interested in this card, the thing is that if they aren't interested in playing it, then nobody's interested in playing.
This is true,
right?
Oh, like, well, not nobody. We were just talking about Cox.
If anybody else is playing this outside of exactly Storm, they're doing it either for like their fun F&M, or they're not actually maximizing the card for like the potential that it has. Right? They're actively doing something weaker with it by choice, which is not like, it's not like, oh, theoretically you could do all of these different cool things with it. It's like, no, this either is killing you via Storm or enabling Storm to kill you, or it's just doing something that you are voluntarily doing worse than what it would otherwise could do. And so is it powerful? Yeah. Will it show up and see play? Probably. Will it do anything of like surprise or interest? Absolutely not. Yeah. Will it be powerful when it actually does the thing that it does to kill you? Yeah. It's 3 mana, draw 19 if you want it.
If you think Phil's completely off base, we have a whole Patreon tier called Unban Necropotence, You Cowards. So my thoughts about this card are relatively the same, but I wanted to mention 2 things. This allows you to play cards like Leyline of Anticipation to kind of get around, like that like 5 card hand size thing. Like you could win that turn, which, is that interesting? I don't know. But it is a thing you could do. But then also, this could be combined with Energy Field to in the same way like Rest in Peace is combined with Energy Field, and that would be like a thing. So that would be, I mean, I don't know that you would want to play Energy Field in a 3 black mana permanent in your deck, but those are 2 points.
I want to go back to the idea: Energy Field plus Necrodominance, super sweet. Right? Like, that sounds so sweet. It sounds super sweet. And everybody who's looking at that super sweet deck, which I agree is super forking sweet, would be like, oh, or we could just, I don't know, play Dark Ritual and Tendrils of Agony.
Yeah, I agree. All right, moving on to a Nethergoif. Nethergoif is a 1 black mana Tarmogoyf, but it only counts your graveyard. So that's the difference between Nethergoif and Tarmogoyf. And it also has Escape for basically Delirium. Exile any number of other cards from graveyards with 4 or more different types to escape for 3 mana. 2 and a black mana to escape Nethergoif. Now, Nethergoif, I think, might see play.
Nethergoif will for sure see play. I mean, granted, like it's got to be in the realm of like, I think maybe it'll show up as like a 1 or 2 of as just like a recursive threat. That like the escape actually being valuable. However, like it doesn't have evasion, and every other thing has evasion in formats that sees play these days. If it's not like some kind of like hate bear prison piece like on a body, so it's possible that it's just like not as good as Stalactite Stalker because Stalker has evasion, and being able to get chumped by an orc army is significant enough that it's not worth it. But it depends on the format that we're in, right? Like if we get into a bunch of Grixis mirrors where like, okay, you have Stalactite Stalker, so it can get big and it has removal, and it itself is removal and has evasion. Is that more impactful than just having a recursive threat that can theoretically be very large immediately for 1 mana, depending on what you're doing? Like this is obviously only going to see play alongside, I imagine, Dragon Rage Channeler because Forkin, obviously. But my biggest takeaway from this card is I wish that if they have keywords and they're in a set where they could use keywords, and they have Delirium in this set, that it's 2 and a black, escape any number of other cards from your graveyard, as you said, with 4 more card types among them, which is Delirium.
That's
and I want them to just like change their wording to be able to say exile any number of cards that are delirious from your graveyard. You know, like I just want them to like condense the words down.
Yeah. Well, the fact that you can exile any number, maybe that becomes useful in some way. I don't know.
Yeah.
But the thing I was thinking about with this is like, so obviously, like, look, it's going to be played in some deck that wants to do tempo things for sure. But the question on my mind, and I think this is the question that this card is asking, is a 1-mana Tarmogoyf good enough? You know, like if this card sees play, the answer is yes. If this card sees no play and hits bulk, the answer is no. Like 2-mana Tarmogoyf, not good enough anymore. 1-mana Tarmogoyf, maybe good enough. Will we see Modern Horizons 4 with a 0-mana, like an Ornithopter Tarmogoyf? You know?
Yeah, I think that the thing that I get that 1 mana is a big deal, and you know that's meaningful. I do think that the thing that will be conditioned, the biggest condition of like whether or not you play this versus anything else, and why I expect this to only show up as maybe a 1/2 of first starting out, as people like test the waters for it, is the lack of evasion enough of a drawback given the power creep over the last couple of years where now everything is evasive. And I get that if everybody is playing with only evasive, then nothing has evasion because then the evasion doesn't matter. But one of the most played cards is Bowmaster, and if you can just put if we're trying to race each other and I have creatures with evasion and you have Nethergoif and my Orc army can just sit in front of your Nethergoif for a turn and blank a combat, that's meaningful. And if this thing doesn't have flying, can't block flyers, and that's meaningful in race situations, it doesn't matter how big this thing is if I have a body on the ground. And this is not doing anything meaningfully disruptive the way that a Bowmaster or a Dothvi Voidwalker or any of the other creatures that we play that, but I mean, Voidwalker also has evasion. Bowmaster is multiple bodies that does, I don't think it would necessarily be competing with those creatures because I think it's going to go in Grixis Delver and that's more or less it. But I'm sold on this card seeing play. I'm not sold on it like becoming the mantelpiece. I see it as like moving in and out, like the same way that like sometimes Death Shadow shows up as a deck. You'll see Nethergoif show up sometimes as a creature that's played. So like I won't be surprised to see it across the table, but I don't think I'll be impressed by it either.
Yeah, I want to stop here for just a second, Phil, and we're about halfway through all of our spoilers. Does Modern Horizons 3 feel like a lower power level than the 2 previous Modern Horizons to you?
No.
Okay.
No.
I feel like it's lower. It certainly feels lower than 1 and lower than 2 in my opinion. But we've still got cards to go. I think part of that might be the fact that it doesn't have the pitch creatures. So
it might also be it might also be that I think we are so desensitized to the fact that we know power creep is coming.
It's true. Yeah.
So like, of course, like let's be real with ourselves. We literally just talked about actual factual fucking Necropotence.
Necropotence, yeah.
They just reprinted Necropotence with wording that is more agreeable to like the way that cards function today rather than like the weirdness of like an early Magic card. But like they effectively just put Necrodominance into the format, right? And we're just like, yeah, it'll do what Necrodominance did, and we're just like sort of passive about it. My point of view is I'm so desensitized to the power creep that like there's of course there's a bunch of like super busted things that we're not seeing, and like yes, it hides under the guise of like sometimes it's energy and energy wasn't impressive, or it hides under the guise of like every new Eldrazi that's just like yup, okay, whatever, they all win the game on them, so whatever. I don't think that this set is less powerful than the other sets necessarily. I just think that the cards are so bold-faced, powerful with what they do and exactly what they do in ways that aren't all that interesting in how they would make you think of like where they would go or what they would do, because they're so clearly one shot for whatever it is that they do. And if they don't do something like that, then they just don't feel, and they're not creating any type of new archetype, then it feels like you're just your hokey fun ofs, like Chthonian Nightmare, like, okay, functionally, it's not actually going to do anything other than like it's going to do something, but it's not doing what it says it does.
Yeah,
right? It reads as energy. What it really reads is going to be CMC 3 or less for the most part, like unless you are doing something excessive, which I don't think the format really gives you all that much time for. But
yeah, so it feels like it belongs in a deck that also wants to play Pernicious Deed, and that we're just not at that time anymore.
Yeah, I just get the sense that a lot of the cards, if they don't feel exciting, it's because they might just not be.
Yeah.
But the thing is the other point that I want to make on does it feel exciting? It might also be that because of the format is so constrained by the power outliers right now, that when we got Modern Horizons 2 and it overhauled a whole bunch of shit, including just giving Delver its brand new precon that like took the best shell and just preconned it into the modern era. Like if you look at, you know, it's Dragon Rage Channeler, Murktide Regent. For a second it was Unholy Heat, and then, you know, it's been optimized from there. But like they just got a new suite of threats that just were power creeped into their new, you know, Days Wasteland show. I also think that like right now we're looking at everything through the lens of the current Legacy format, and the current Legacy format is so compressed by the power outliers that if anything doesn't fit into exactly those shells, we go, well, is it even that exciting? Because we know the context in which it's going to have to be in. And if everything is going to have to stand up to Grief and Beanstalk, then it's like, well, is that really all that interesting if, you know, it's not actually going to do it? You know what I mean? Like it's got to be so powerful and so free that if it's not doing those things, all of these really cool, interesting cards, it becomes tough to view them in a home that's going to do anything meaningful. Yeah. And that's not me trying to be a downer. That's just like where I get, I think a lot of these cards are sweet, but
I agree with your, with what you're saying, but I think I feel like this set is a lower power level, at least as far as effect on the format is concerned. Perhaps that's where I'm coming from, than the previous two. But I mean, we haven't even seen these cards hit decks yet, so we do have to wait before we make that feeling.
You might be right in that we just had the conversation of like Emperor of Bones, and me being like, there's no way that any one of these types of effect would ever be like, is it Leyline of the Void that also is an overcosted, unblockable beater that also has a way to potentially like steal your opponent's shit? Like, if it's not that, all for 2 mana, which is what Dothi Voidwalker is, then is it going to be C play? So, you know, in a way, you know, as we're talking through, like you might actually be way more right than me here that like MH2 was way more juiced, because that one comparison alone of like Dothi Voidwalker being, if it was just Magus of the Leyline of the Void that also was evasive, that would be enough. And then they tacked on the additional thing. If Murktide Regent didn't have the growth clause, it just had what it is as an undercosted beater, that would have been enough. If DRC didn't have the Delirium clause, it just had the Surveil clause, that would probably be enough. So, you know, the fact that like they might have like learned from that, recognizing that I don't know if players universally disliked the fact that all of those cards were juiced to the 9s for, you know, no additional reason, and that they didn't have any self-control to like not add the 6th line of text to every card.
Yeah, maybe they've gotten a little more docile in their dotage, and they've taken maybe 2 or 3 lines of text off of each of these cards. Eternal Durdles is proud to be sponsored by Moxfield.com. Moxfield is the best deck building website on the internet. You can find all of my and Phil's decks in links below, including decks from this episode. And if you do, you'll be directly supporting the channel. All right, so let's talk about Ripples of Undeath. That is an enchantment for 1 in the black. At the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, mill 3 cards. Then you may pay 1 and 3 life. If you do, put a card amongst those cards into your hand.
So the best decks in the format right now, strip your hand down to nothing and put a Trax into play on turn 1.5.
Yeah.
The other best deck puts an enchantment into play that replaces itself and then turns every card into the deck, replaces itself. So you have one that's a 2 mana replaces itself engine, and the other one is a deck that strips you down to nothing on turn 1 and then puts it attracts into play on turn 2. So the idea that you would play something that doesn't immediately impact the board, and then the thing that it does may or may not do anything, I feel like is too far gone. And that's an example of what I mean by the context of the format that we're in.
I do agree with that to a point. 2 mana, like I'm not playing this as a 4 of by any stretch of the imagination. You know, this is like I'm not building my deck around it. But as like a role player, Sylvan Library sees play, and
no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't.
It doesn't. Yeah, no, it doesn't. Maverick, it sees it in Infect.
It did years ago. It did years ago, my guy.
It does. It does see some play. It's not like redefining the format, but it does see play. Here's the thing, though: is this card is getting you some amount of value immediately. If you play this in your pre-combat main phase, you get the choice. Now you have to have that one extra mana, but you're going to get the choice to recoup that one card.
That's what I mean, though. It's not doing it. If you play this on 2, if you don't have that spare mana, which means that it's a turn 3 play, not a turn 2 play, you're just milling cards and not doing anything other than milling 3 cards. And if you want to mill cards, if you want to mill cards, you're just playing Dragon Rage Channeler.
Yeah.
Or you're playing Stitcher Supplier.
Well, right? I like this because I live in a world of hope where Orcish Bowmasters and Riskaminator ends up getting banned soonish, and we can look at this card and be like, well, you know what? Death Shadow would love a card like this.
And I'm just saying, like, I'm not trying to be a downer. I'm just trying to be objective because, you know, like, if people, like, if we have any sort of influence or impact at all, and people are going to, like, you know, put time, effort, and money into testing these cards out, only to have them not do anything and get bodied, like, I hope to be wrong. I hope to be wrong about a lot of these cards, but, like, the constraints of the format just will not allow for stuff that is like this, that requires time and development to get to. There is no time in development.
Yeah. Now, to that end, Phil, I will be streaming because of the Magic Online Creator Program. I will be streaming challenges of Legacy one-on-ones with other Legacy content creators between like 2 and 5 on Friday. So if you get a chance, tune into that. It's Twitch TV/DurtleMagus. Almost any Legacy content creator is also going to be doing this, so you can just check and see what your favorite content creator is going to be doing. I think Bryant is going to be on there too. But this will be fun to just mess around with these things and see in a vacuum if any of these are good. I think one of the very first decks I'm going to be playing is like just see if Riskaminator with Psychic Frog is just like that's where everyone is now. But to that end, our final card for Black is of course the Flip Planeswalker Sorin of House Markov for 1 the black, a human noble legendary creature with lifelink and extort. It's a 1/4, and it says at the beginning of your pre-combat main phase, if you gain 3 or more life this turn, exile Sorin Markov and then return it transformed under its owner's control. And then the transform is a 3 mana planeswalker that also has extort. And
3 loyalty planeswalker. 3 loyalty planeswalker.
3 loyalty planeswalker. +2 is create a food token. -1 is it deals damage equal to the amount of life you gain this turn to any target. And then it's 6 is gain control of target creature. It becomes a vampire in addition to its other types. Put a lifelink counter onto it if you control a white permanent other than Sorin. So, a lot of text on that card. It's weird, Phil. It's weird that, like, so obviously, Ancestral Recall would proc Tamio. Healing Salve would proc Sorin. We now have a reason to play Healing Salve.
We finally got there. Yeah. Finally, Healing Salve will see its day in the sun.
I wish it would have just been the same case for all the other planeswalkers of like whatever color. Like Johnny should have been like, you know, if you play a lightning bolt, then this flips, and then giant growth, and which one am I missing here?
Ancestral,
giant Dark growth, Ritual, Dark Ritual, yeah, Dark Ritual, yeah. So then I guess Grist would be Dark Ritual. Anyhow, what do you think about this card?
So I haven't thought too deeply about this card because I don't again, everything in the format has evasion. So I don't know how much a 1/4 really matters all that much. And like the stats are not anything impressive, and extort to me is flavor text because the idea that you would have excess mana to do anything for drain 1, gain 1 is like, okay, if you cast a spell and then tap yourself into daze mana, like, I don't know about that.
I think with the extort here, like that's just to flip this guy, right? Like,
yeah, the thing that I've really seen here in a meaningful context is like, okay, this is like another. Remember how we were always joking about Veto doing anything interesting?
Yeah.
And so we were like, oh, you can Nourishing Shoal plus this thing to dome them with Veto.
Yeah.
To me, this just strikes me as like it's a 2 mana Veto instead of a 3 mana Veto.
Yeah.
Because if you play this on turn 2 and then Nourishing Shoal, exiling whatever the fattest thing that you can exile is, gain 15 or whatever, then post combat this thing flips and then you minus and you dome them for 15, right? So like that alone is like okay. That's like powerful enough. Now that means that you have to put bad cards into your deck.
Yes.
So it's like, is that actually good enough in a format where you have to presume that if you lose the die roll that your starting 7 is actually going to be a starting 5 and you're not going to have which choice of cards you're discarding. So, is that can you actually in a format like this play cards that are bad if they don't have the other contingent piece that make them, worthwhile to begin with? I personally don't think so. So, don't get me wrong, like cool, interesting card. And if people explore it, I'd love to see it. I don't see it doing anything impactful in terms of like actual competitive meta. I don't see it doing anything impactful.
Yeah, I think I mentioned Sorin specifically because we have covered all of the other flip planeswalkers, and I think evaluating them all in the context of each other is important as well. I don't think that this will see any meaningful play. Creating a food token doesn't really matter. Gaining control of a creature and turning into a vampire doesn't matter. Not for 6 loyalty, at least. So, anyhow, that is all of the black cards that we could find for what's the word I'm looking for here? For your perusal, your approval for Modern Horizons 3. Thank you for watching. If you get a chance, subscribe to this channel, like the video if you could, tell a friend, and if you can support us on Patreon, we would love that. You can go to patreon.com/eternaldurdles. Thank you for watching, everybody. Before you go, I need some help. Please subscribe to this channel and do your part to help sustain the legacy content ecosystem. Just subscribing to this channel goes a long way to reminding YouTube that people love and support this format. Now, if you really want to go the extra mile, you should think about supporting us through Patreon. Both the links for subscription and Patreon are right here. And if you're listening on an audio format, you can go to patreon.com/eternaldurdles. Thanks so much for watching.